Hello, I'm Lucy Alexander from the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and with me here today is Michael Betenbaugh, who is this year's winner of the prestigious D.I.C. Wang Award. So, Michael, can you tell me, what does receiving this award mean to you?
Well, I came of age when Danny was at his really the height of his career. He really defined cell culture engineering, which is the backbone of the biopharmaceutical industry now. He put an enormous number of students into industry, which are now leaders in their own right. He came up with many of the technical innovations that are used today in the biopharmaceutical industry. And I work in some of the same areas, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. But to be associated with the man who, certainly from an academic perspective, and you could argue from both an academic and industrial perspective, that he defined the biopharmaceutical cell culture industry, which is responsible for hundreds of billions of dollars from companies across the globe. To be in any way associated with that guy is an honor, because he is very much the father or the grandfather of cell culture biopharmaceuticals. And if I can make just a fraction of an impact that he had, and to have my name at this stage of my career associated with that is one of the honors of my career, easily.
Of course. And you've titled the talk you're going to give today, Following the Advice of Daniel Wang, Improving Quality Through Cell Culture Engineering. Can you talk about why you came up with this title and idea?
So, I came up with it for two reasons, and maybe I'll talk about the second one. Danny, I call him Danny sometimes. I met him one time. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Danny Wang worked in a couple of areas that I'm going similar to what I worked in. One of the critical aspects of cell culture engineering is how good is the product, and how much of the product do you make. These are really core chemical engineering questions, so in many ways he defined the essence of some of the key problems that are critical for the biopharma industry. I've been fortunate to kind of work in some of those same type of problems. And so what I'm going to talk about today is, following the legacy. He blazed the path on many of these problems, and what are we doing today in those areas? What can we do to advance the legacy that Danny Wang established in terms of cell culture engineering, many of those aspects that I alluded to earlier. So once again, it's an honor to work on some of the same type of problems, and hopefully I can have some impact in very much following those footsteps. And so what I'm going to do today is talk about some of the problems that he worked on, and some of the advances that he made, and as I said, pioneering advances, and then some of the work that I've done on those problems since he identified and defined them. What was really interesting is looking at some of his old papers, and there are many of them, is that I think I'm coming up with a clever idea or a clever approach to solve a problem. I'll go back and I'll read one of his abstracts, and I'm like, oh my God, he was working on this 20 years ago. Maybe I'm not so smart after all. So it was enlightening, in addition, humbling, but also enlightening about how much he really did. Because you really never know, you can really never appreciate the scope of somebody's work kind of in the moment. It takes you time to look back. And the second thing is I'd like to talk about is really the following the advice of Danny Wang, and hopefully you'll see this in the talk, is that I got to know him as a young graduate student. He came down and gave a seminar, and so he did follow I wasn't an MIT grad, so I wasn't a direct academic descendant of him, but he got to know me as a graduate student. We were working in a somewhat similar area. I went to work in academia, so he was well aware of what I was doing. And so I did consider him one of my mentors, not an official mentor, but an unofficial mentor. And, you know, as a young, impressionable academic, you're trying to impress the leaders in the field. And, you know, there were a number of them: Danny Wang, Jay Bailey, Mike Schuler. I mean, these are legends in our field, and many of the awards are named for these guys, and they were the pioneers in the industry that I talked to you about. And so I distinctively remember I had been working as an assistant and associate professor at Johns Hopkins for about 5 or 10 years, and I was really excited about the stuff that I'm doing, and you'll see that in the talk. At some point along the way, I gave a talk, and Danny was in the audience, right? And I was working in a certain area, insect cell culture, that Danny wasn't working in. Danny was working in CHO cell culture. And Danny, I gave my talk, really proud of it, doing a lot of fancy molecular biology. And so Danny said, "Mike, you know, that stuff you're doing, that's really interesting, but maybe you should do something on CHO cells, because they're the Chinese hamster ovary cells. They're the ones that really matter. You know, this stuff you're doing in insects, interesting and all, but maybe you should work on something that really matters." And when Danny Wang says something to you like that, you know, you like, it takes you down a notch too. I mean, he was very diplomatic the way he said it. They said it's good work, it's interesting work, but maybe you should focus on some other areas, you know, closer to what I'm doing directly in that space. And so I went, and that's just in my talk. I went home, thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, you know, maybe I should listen to Danny Wang. So I won't say I completely transformed what I was doing, but I certainly took his advice into the account. And so I kind of slowly made these steps towards working in a more similar area. You know, so I basically followed the advice of Danny Wang. So my first part of my talk is when I'm going to talk about what I did in insect cell culture, and then following the advice of Danny Wang, I did some kind of reorientation so that the second half of my career has been focused more in some of those areas similar to what he did. So I really did follow the advice of Danny Wang, and quite frankly, it was probably the right advice. So for all those reasons, you can see why this is a real honor to have my name associated with a legend like that.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today, and congratulations again.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you at the talk.